Welcome back to my Auntie Rose Narrates channel, where I share touching real-life stories every single day. If you love stories that move your heart, hit subscribe and give this video a like. Let's jump right into today's story. When my daughter laughed at my wedding, I did not cry. I smiled instead. That smile took every bit of strength I had left. 500 people were watching me stand there in a soft blue dress, my hands trembling just a little as I held the arm of my new husband, Thomas Miller. The room was bright with lights and flowers, and the sound of glasses clinking filled the air. It was supposed to be a happy day. It was supposed to be a fresh start at 62 years old Dot, but then my son leaned toward my daughter-in-law and said something he thought I would not hear. "That's her husband," Michael whispered, loud enough to cut through the music. "That's a stepfather now? He looks like a loser?" Emily laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a quiet one. She laughed openly, proudly. Her parents laughed too. Their whole table joined in, as if it were a joke prepared just for them. I felt the laughter hit me before the words did. It rolled across the room like a cold wind. Faces turned. Some guests looked away. Some pretended not to hear, and some smiled, uncomfortable but silent. Thomas squeezed my hand. Just once, a small squeeze. He did not look angry. He did not look hurt. He looked calm. Too calm. Dot. I had met Thomas 2 years earlier at a public library in Ohio. He wore plain clothes, drove an old car, spoke softly. He listened when I talked about losing my first husband, Robert, to cancer. He never tried to impress anyone. He never talked about money. He said he liked quiet mornings and simple dinners. My children never liked him. They said he was boring, that he was beneath me, that after everything I had sacrificed for them, I deserved better. But standing there at my wedding, hearing my own son mock the man I loved, I realized something painful. They were not protecting me. They were embarrassed by me. The laughter faded. The band tried to keep playing. Someone tapped a glass and asked us to kiss. I leaned in and kissed Thomas on the cheek. My lips were cold. Then the doors at the back of the hall opened. Heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floor. One man walked in, then another, then another. They were all dressed the same. Dark suits, quiet faces, focused eyes. The room fell silent, and that was the moment I understood. This wedding was not going to end the way anyone expected. Not my children, not their families, and not even me. Before I tell you what happened when those men walked in, you need to understand who I was before that day. You need to understand the life I lived and the love I gave so freely, believing it would come back to me the same way. My name is Margaret Wilson. Most people call me Maggie. I was born and raised in a small town in Indiana, the kind of place where neighbors wave from their porches and church bells tell you what day it is. I married my first husband, Robert Wilson, when I was 23 years old. He was kind, quiet, a man who worked hard and came home tired but smiling. We built our life slowly. No shortcuts, no luck, just effort. Robert worked as an electrical technician. I stayed home when the children were small, then took a job at a local insurance office when Michael started school. We saved every dollar we could. We fixed things instead of replacing them. We dreamed small dreams because small dreams felt safer. Michael was our first child. He had Robert's serious eyes and my stubbornness. He was smart, always asking questions, always wanting more. Then came Sarah, 5 years later. She was gentle, emotional, and deeply sensitive to the moods around her. I loved them both with everything I had. When Robert got sick, everything changed. Cancer does not knock politely. It barges into your life and takes over every room. He fought for 3 years. 3 long years of hospital visits, quiet prayers, and nights where I pretended to be strong so my children would not be afraid. I was 48 when I buried my husband out after that. My life became about survival, about keeping the house running, about making sure my children finished school and felt safe. I did not think about myself, not once. Michael went to college out of state. Sarah stayed closer to home. I worked longer hours, took on extra shifts. I helped with tuition, paid for weddings, helped with down payments. Every time they needed something, I found a way. When Michael married Emily, I welcomed her into my home like a daughter. She came from a well-off family. Her parents owned businesses. They talked about investments and vacations I had never heard of. I felt small around them, but I tried not to show it. Emily was polite but distant. She corrected my words sometimes. She smiled in a way that never reached her eyes. Michael changed after marrying her. He spoke faster, louder. He interrupted me. He acted as if he was always in a hurry to be somewhere else. Sarah married a man named David. He was decent but quiet. He let Sarah lead. I could see she had learned something from watching my marriage. Something about endurance. Years passed, the house grew quiet. I sold the old family home and moved into a smaller place near the edge of town. It made sense. Less space, less cost. I told myself I was happy, and most days I believed it. That was when I met Thomas. It was raining the first day I saw him. I was sitting at a long table in the public library, sorting through old paperwork. My glasses were fogging up, and I was feeling tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Thomas sat across from me without asking. Not rude, just gentle. He nodded and smiled, then went back to reading his book. We did not speak that day. The second time, he asked if the seat was taken. The third time, he commented on the weather. The fourth time, he asked my name. He never rushed anything. Thomas told me he was widowed too. His wife, Eleanor, had passed away suddenly years earlier. No children, no close family. He said he liked libraries because they were quiet and honest. Books never pretended to be something they were not. We started having coffee together after our library visits. Cheap coffee, paper cups. We talked about ordinary things, weather, memories, regrets we carried quietly. He never asked about my money, never tried to impress me. He wore the same jacket every winter, drove an old sedan with a cracked dashboard. He paid in cash and always tipped kindly. When I told my children about him, their reactions were polite but cold. He seems nice, Sarah said. But her voice was unsure. Michael did not hide his feelings. Mom, you don't really know this guy. At your age, people take advantage. That hurt more than I let on. I was not weak. I was not foolish. I had lived a full life. I had survived loss and exhaustion and years of putting myself last. But to my children, I was suddenly someone who needed to be protected from her own choices. When Thomas proposed, it was simple. No ring at first. Just a quiet question while we watched the sun set behind the trees. I said yes. Michael was upset. Emily was offended. Sarah was worried. They asked questions that felt more like accusations. Where did he come from? What did he do for work? Why did he never talk about his past? Thomas answered calmly every time. He said he had done well enough for himself, that he preferred a simple life now, that his past was quiet and finished. That was not good enough for them. They offered to help plan the wedding, then slowly took control of it. Bigger venue, more guests, more money. I tried to keep it small, but they insisted. Emily said appearances mattered. Michael said family reputation mattered. I started to feel like a guest at my own wedding. Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself it was just stress, that once the day passed, things would settle. The morning of the wedding, Thomas held my hands and looked me in the eyes. "No matter what happens today," he said softly, "remember that I chose you. And you chose me." I did not know how much I would need those words, because by the time the laughter filled the room and the doors opened behind us, I realized something was already breaking. Not just my relationship with my children, but the image they had built of who they thought they were. And the truth about Thomas was about to step into the light, the not yet, not until the next moment. When one of those men in dark suits took a single step forward, and the entire room held its breath. The room did not know how to breathe anymore. 500 guests sat frozen in their seats, their smiles slipping away as the sound of those footsteps faded. The music had stopped. Even the soft clinking of glasses was gone. It felt as if the entire hall had been wrapped in cotton, thick and heavy. I remember thinking how strange it was that silence could be louder than laughter. The men stood near the entrance. There were 6 of them, all tall, all calm, all wearing dark suits that fit perfectly, as if they had been made for only one purpose. Their faces were unreadable, not angry, not proud, just focused. Emily leaned toward Michael again. This time her voice was not mocking. It was sharp with worry. "Who are they?" she whispered. Michael shook his head. "Security? Did someone complain?" Her father shifted in his chair, clearly irritated. "This is inappropriate," he muttered. "Someone should tell them to leave." No one moved. I felt Thomas's hand loosen from mine. Not because he was nervous, because he was preparing. He leaned slightly toward me. "Maggie," he said gently, "whatever happens next, please remember this. I never wanted to hurt your children. I only wanted peace." Before I could ask what he meant, one of the men stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He did not clear his throat. He simply spoke, calm and steady, as if addressing a meeting room instead of a wedding hall. "Mr. Miller," he said, looking directly at Thomas, "we're ready when you are." Every head turned toward us. I felt my heart begin to pound, slow and heavy. "Mr. Miller," Emily's mother scoffed quietly. "So he hired staff now?" she whispered to the woman beside her. Thomas did not answer right away. He looked around the room, at the flowers, at the guests, at my children. Then he nodded. The man turned and gave a small signal. 2 of the others walked down the aisle, not toward us, toward the front tables. Michael stood up abruptly. "Hey," he said, forcing a laugh. "What's going on here? This is a private event." One of the men stopped beside him. "Sir," he said respectfully, "we're here to ensure an orderly transition." "Transition to what?" Emily snapped. No answer came. Instead, another man approached the wedding planner, quietly handed her a document, and waited. Her face drained of color as she read it. She looked at Thomas, then at me, then back at the paper. I need everyone to remain seated," she said, her voice trembling. That was when fear began to ripple through the room. Michael walked toward us, anger flushing his face. "Mom, did you know about this? Is this some kind of stunt?" I shook my head slowly. I truly did not know. My stomach twisted with confusion. Thomas finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Michael," he said, "please sit down." The room reacted to that. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. There was authority in his tone. Not the loud kind. The kind that does not need permission. Michael hesitated, then laughed nervously. "You don't get to tell me what to do?" Thomas looked at him with something close to sadness. "I never wanted to," he replied. Another man stepped forward and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we apologize for the interruption. This event will conclude shortly. Transportation and arrangements will be handled. Gasps spread through the hall. Conclude, Emily's father shouted. Who do you think you are? The man met his gaze evenly. We are authorized representatives of Miller Holdings. The name meant nothing to most people in that moment, but with soon, I felt my knees weaken. I reached for Thomas's arm. What is happening? I whispered. He looked at me, his eyes soft. I promised you honesty, he said. I just did not promise timing. Emily stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is insane. You can't just shut down a wedding because you feel insulted. Thomas turned to her slowly. This wedding, he said gently, was never about pride. But what happened here today crossed the line. Michael stepped between us. You humiliated yourself, he said harshly. Now you're humiliating my mother. I flinched at that. Thomas's voice lowered. No, he said. You did that yourself? One of the men approached the microphone stand near the stage. He adjusted it slightly. I need your attention, he said. Mr. Thomas Miller is the majority owner and executive chairman of Miller Holdings. He requested privacy for personal matters. Today, that privacy was violated. The room erupted. People spoke over one another. Chairs moved. Phones came out. Miller Holdings. Someone near the back whispered, That's impossible. Another said, Isn't that the investment group? Emily's mother turned pale. That company owns half the downtown redevelopment. Michael stared at Thomas. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I felt dizzy. The room tilted slightly. Thomas Miller, the man I met at the library. The man who drank cheap coffee. The man who wore the same jacket every winter. A billionaire. My mind struggled to connect the two versions of him. Thomas stepped forward and took the microphone from the man. I never hid who I was, he said calmly. I only hid what I owned. Because money changes how people listen. He looked directly at my children. Today proved that. Emily's father stood abruptly. This is outrageous. You invited us under false pretenses. Thomas nodded once. And you mocked a man you believed had nothing? In front of the woman you claimed to respect. The words landed like stones. Sarah had been silent this entire time. Now she stood, tears running down her face. Mom, she said softly, I'm so sorry. I wanted to go to her, but my legs would not move. Michael's face shifted through disbelief, anger, and something else. Fear. You could have told us, he said. You should have told us. Thomas answered quietly. Would it have changed how you treated me? Michael said nothing. The men began guiding guests toward the exits. Not roughly, kindly, firmly. Cars were waiting. Staff members apologized. The wedding hall emptied slowly. Like a tide pulling back, Emily stood frozen. Her perfect dress suddenly meaningless. This can't be real, she whispered. Thomas turned to me. Maggie, he said. If you want to leave with them, I will understand. I looked at my children, at their faces, at their regret. Then I looked at the man who had never raised his voice, never asked for praise, never used his power to control me. And I realized something painful and clear. For years, I had been loved for what I gave, not for who I was. I took Thomas's hand. I'm staying, I said. The hall was nearly empty now. Chairs scattered. Flowers untouched. Michael took a step toward me. Mom, please, don't do this. I looked at him, my voice steady for the first time in years. I already did, I said. A long time ago. We walked down the aisle together. Not as bride and groom, but as two people choosing dignity over approval. Outside. The night air was cool, quiet. Cars waited. But behind us, inside that hall, something else remained. Families standing in the ruins of their own pride, and the full cost of their laughter was only beginning to sink in because the truth had been revealed, but the consequences had not yet arrived. The night after the wedding did not end with anger, It ended with silence. Thomas and I rode in the back of a dark sedan through streets that were nearly empty. The city lights passed by the window like distant memories. No one spoke, not because there was nothing to say, but because too much had been said already. I kept my hands folded in my lap, staring at my wedding ring. It was simple. No large stone. No shine meant to impress. Just a quiet circle of gold. I had chosen it that way on purpose. Thomas noticed. "Are you afraid?" He asked gently. I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "I think I'm finally awake." He nodded, as if he understood exactly what I meant. We arrived at a hotel overlooking the river. Not grand, not small, calm, the kind of place that did not need to prove anything. When we stepped inside, the staff greeted Thomas with respect, but without ceremony. They called him sir, not boss. That night, I did not sleep much. I kept seeing Michael's face, Emily's laugh, Sarah's tears, the sound of chairs moving, the weight of my own stillness as I chose not to run after my children. I wondered if I had failed as a mother. In the morning, my phone was heavy with missed calls. Michael called 12 times. Emily sent 3 messages. Long ones, carefully written, full of apologies that arrived too late. Sarah left a voicemail. She did not apologize. She cried. Thomas watched me listen to it. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he asked only one question. "What do you want to do?" No one had asked me that in years. "I want time," I said. "And truth." He nodded. "Then that's what you'll have." By noon, the story had spread. Friends called. Distant relatives messaged. People who had not spoken to me in years suddenly remembered my name. Some congratulated me. Some asked questions they had no right to ask. Did not answer most of them. Thomas and I walked along the river that afternoon. The wind was gentle. The water moved slowly, steady and sure. He told me things he had never said out loud. He told me about Miller Holdings, about how it began with his father, then grew quietly over decades, about how wealth had cost him friendships, about how Eleanor, his first wife, had loved him before the money became enormous. She died before it could ruin us. He said softly. I stopped walking, looked at him. "And me?" I asked. "Did you test me?" He shook his head immediately. "No, I protected myself." There is a difference. That answer stayed with me. 3 days later, Sarah came to see me. She arrived alone. No husband, no excuses. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if something inside her had folded inward. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. "I was wrong," she said, her voice shaking. I didn't laugh, but I didn't stop it either. I reached across the table and held her hand. "Silence can hurt too," I said gently. She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I didn't know how to choose between you and them." "I do," I said. That was the first turning point. Not anger, clarity. Michael waited longer. He did not come quietly. He came with urgency. He showed up at the hotel one evening. His suit wrinkled, his confidence cracked. "Mom, we need to talk," he said quickly. Thomas excused himself without being asked. Michael paced the room. "You don't understand what this has done," he said. "Emily's parents are furious. Deals are falling apart. People are asking questions." I watched him closely. "About what?" I asked. "About us," he said. "About why we didn't know, or why you laughed." I asked quietly. He stopped pacing. "That was a joke," he said weakly. "No," I replied. "That was judgment." He ran his hands through his hair. "If you told us who he was," I stood up slowly, "then what?" I asked. "You would have respected him? Or you would have respected his money?" Michael's silence answered me. I felt something break loose inside my chest. Not pain, freedom. I raised you to be kind, I said. Not impressed. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. What do you want from me? He asked. I want you to look at the man you mocked, I said, and ask yourself why you felt entitled to do. So he swallowed hard. Days passed, then weeks. Thomas did not punish anyone, but consequences arrived anyway. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls slowed. The families who had laughed found doors closing quietly, not slammed. Just closed. One afternoon, Emily came alone. She sat stiffly across from me, her perfect posture finally failing. I was wrong, she said. I judged him. And you? Yes, I replied. She waited for forgiveness. I waited for understanding. There is a difference. I don't know how to fix this. She said. You don't, I answered calmly. You change. She left without arguing. Thomas watched all of this without interference. One night, I asked him why. Why don't you say more? I asked, because this is your story, he replied. Not my victory. That was the second turning point. I realized I had married a man who did not need to win, only to be true. Third turning point came quietly. It was a letter. Handwritten. From Michael. Not an apology. Not yet. It was a confession. He wrote about feeling small his entire life, about chasing approval, about marrying into money to feel secure, about laughing so no one would laugh at him first. I cried as I read it, not because it excused him, but because I finally saw him. Folded the letter carefully, and I waited. Because forgiveness, like respect, must be earned. And the hardest lesson of all was still ahead, for all of them, including me. Time has a way of smoothing sharp edges. Not by erasing what happened, but by teaching us how to hold it without bleeding. In the weeks after Michael's letter, I did not rush to respond. I carried it with me instead, folded neatly in my purse. I took it out while waiting for coffee, while sitting by the window at night, while walking beside Thomas in the early mornings, when the world felt honest and unguarded. Thomas never asked what I would do. He trusted me to know. That trust changed me more than any apology ever could. We moved into a small house near the river shortly after. Not an estate, not a statement, just a place with wide windows, a garden out back, and a kitchen that filled with light in the afternoon. Thomas said it was the first house he had chosen only because it felt peaceful. I understood that feeling. We learned each other slowly. Marriage at our age was not about fireworks. It was about rhythm, about sharing silence without needing to fill it, about knowing when to speak and when to simply sit beside one another. Thomas made breakfast every morning. I made dinner most nights. We took walks. We read. We listened to the radio instead of the news. We let the world be loud somewhere else. Sarah visited often. She came alone at first. Then sometimes with David. She helped in the garden. She asked questions instead of making assumptions. One afternoon, while we were planting herbs, she looked at me and said something I will never forget. I want to be brave like you, she said. I smiled gently. I wasn't brave, I replied. I was tired of pretending. That was the truth. Michael took longer. He asked to meet me at a quiet diner halfway between our towns. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting stiffly in a booth, his hands folded like a child, waiting to be corrected. He stood when he saw me. I don't expect forgiveness, he said immediately. I just wanted you to hear this from me. I nodded and sat. He spoke slowly, carefully. He told me about the fallout after the wedding, about how people who once laughed beside him now avoided his calls, about how Emily's parents stopped inviting them over, about how fragile his sense of importance had been all along. I thought money was armor, he said quietly. I thought it made me untouchable. I listened without interrupting, and then he continued, his voice breaking. I realized I hurt the one person who never asked me to be anything but decent. That was when I reached across the table and held his hand. I love you, I said. That never changed. He cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let go of something heavy. Forgiveness did not arrive all at once. It arrived in pieces. A phone call that lasted longer than 5 minutes. A visit without tension. A question asked with humility instead of pride. Emily changed to not overnight, but slowly. She stopped talking about appearances. She started asking about people. She apologized once more, without excuses this time. I accepted it, not because I forgot what she had done, but because I saw effort where there had once been entitlement. Thomas remained steady. Through it all, he never reminded anyone who he was. He never corrected them. He simply showed up as himself. One evening, months later, Michael came for dinner. He stood in the doorway, holding a bottle of wine he clearly did not know how to choose. This house, he said, looking around, it suits you. I smiled. It suits us. After dinner, Thomas and Michael sat on the porch together. They spoke quietly. I did not listen. I did not need to. Trust grows best when it is not supervised. As the seasons changed, so did our lives. The noise faded. The lessons stayed. One afternoon, I asked Thomas a question I had been carrying for a long time. Do you ever regret not telling them sooner? I asked. He thought for a moment. No, he said. Because then I would never have known who they were without the money. I understood. The truth does not rush. It waits. On our first anniversary, we did not throw a party. We packed a small picnic and returned to the library where we first met. We sat at the same long table. We drank cheap coffee from paper cups. Nothing about us had changed. Everything had. I think often about that wedding day. Not with bitterness. With clarity, because it taught me something. I wish I had learned sooner. Respect that depends on status is not respect. That disappears when pride is wounded was never love, and dignity does not need an audience. If you're listening to this and carrying your own quiet hurt, I want you to hear this. You do not need to prove your worth. You do not need to shrink to keep others comfortable, and you do not need permission to choose peace. Sometimes the greatest strength is walking away without shouting. Sometimes the richest life is the one that finally feels honest. I lost a wedding that day, but I gained myself, and that, at last, was everything.